Welcome. My name's Hsiao. I'm the CEO, co-founder of InPlay. And InPlay's goal is to boost access to expanded learning time so that we can minimize learning loss. Used to be summer learning loss, but now it's just plain old learning loss. As a result of COVID-19, the need for expanded learning programs has never been greater. Today in Kansas City, more parents are actually going to work under the 10-10-10 rule, and they need to find a place where they can place their kids where the kids would be safe and engaged. Now we're also hearing that school districts are looking at modifying the school day schedule in the fall. And that's, in order to comply with the public health requirements around capping the classroom sizes. So expanding learning time is greatly needed, but will there be programs? Last year, InPlay listed over 120 providers' programs, but this year we see that they're on hold until they hear whether the shelter in place will be lifted, what the public health and safety requirements will be. So we want to help all the other providers out there that aren't on this call, maybe nonprofits and other for-profits, to have some visibility into what they might expect and what will be required. So this roundtable's goal is to shed light on what is likely to be required and hear directly from program providers and also a school district that is looking to implement their summer program this summer. Today we have with us Christopher Hand, who is the Director of Assessment, Evaluation, and Testing with Liberty Public Schools. And we also have Gail Barker. Welcome, Gail. She's the District Manager for the Learning Care Group, which is a nationwide network of child care centers. And we also have Joe Robertson, who's the Communication Director for the Local Investment Commission, or LINC, in Kansas City. So many of you may be aware of the new CDC requirements for running childcare and schools. Then there's also the Mid-America Regional Council, which issued a preparedness and planning for childcare programs guide. So what we'll do is we'll also include those links when we distribute this recording, so other providers can learn about those rules and requirements. So let's get to the discussion. I'd like to start with you, Gail.
Okay.
The Learning Care Group is the second largest network of childcare providers in the country. You've actually had to implement the CDC requirements and many others, I'm sure. So what are the lessons learned in applying those requirements? Were there any surprises or challenges?
I think all of this has been a bit of a surprise and a challenge. But I think you have to kind of break it apart in pieces and start looking at how will you implement it in your school. I have schools that are as small as 80 children and as large as 180 children. So when you're thinking about all the new programs and restrictions, you really have to start from almost opening a new center and think about how your policies and procedures are going to change. Anywhere from health checks at the door, which, is about educating families as well, teaching them that we need to, wait in the car. And when we have a Brightwell app and they would notify us that they're coming so we can get their children, taking temperatures, having the families understand, our new requirements for health checks and exclusion of children, based off of illness, as well as families if they have exposure. So, it takes some time, but, once you get it in play and you start training, it is definitely workable. It's just new. And like everything, it takes, 30 days to make a habit. And when things change every week, it constantly puts this into play for us to, get new routines going, so to speak. I definitely find that it's probably more of a challenge for teachers right now. because they're used to having that interaction with families, and we've kind of stopped that as far as face-to-face. But, we still communicate with them through all of our apps and different things, but it's not the same as actually seeing them in person. And I also think that, we've had to train the children as to why their parents can't come into the building and how to keep safe space from each other, lots of learning activities with that. So I think everybody is doing the best they can as regulations change.
Okay. And when we had talked earlier, you had also mentioned that because of the front door responsibilities, that now this is a new position that really didn't exist before.
Yeah.
Are there any, talk about that, talk about other changes to positions and the training that's required?
Mm-hmm. Many directors, like I said, wear multiple hats throughout a day. When you run a preschool, there's all these changing elements all the time. But now you kind of got to designate yourself or somebody to be that person, like I said, at the front door, making sure that the children are healthy, the families are healthy, that we're following policy and protocol. So at that point, then you have to staff accordingly. And what I mean by that is you might have to have an extra person or volunteers, depending on the policies within your school, to take children back and forth to classrooms, or to help assist with lunch, or believe it or not, we're still getting tours, because there is childcare centers that are closed. So families are coming and they want to see the school, and that's also limited and changed now. But all of these things going on has really required the extra labor to be able to, conduct all the checks and follow through.
Yeah, okay. Are you seeing any changes in the social emotional state of the children?
I think, that's such a big question, because yes, a little bit, but also I find that stability and routine is the biggest thing for children. So being able to come to the school and see their same teachers, and even our students that are at home, we have created a whole at-home learning that's available on our website. And so parents can just download lesson plans and do very similar activities that we're doing in school. Many of my teachers, bless them, going above and beyond, reading books virtually to students at home, and other activities, doing group times and things so that children can, still have that same stability. So.
Okay. Were there any surprises or challenges that you find you're constantly having to work out among all the centers that you manage?
I think right now it's just the fear of the unknown. We have between whether you're a family member or you're a staff member or you're a director of a school, you think you got a game plan going, and then there's these little things that happen. And what I mean by that is we spend a lot of time, talking with our families and our staff, the people component, as far as fears of working, coming to work, fears of their own family members. And then with the families, they want to bring their children back to care, but they're unsure if they're making the right decision. So they're looking for reassurance and wanting to know all the protocols that is going to make it a safe place for their children to come. So continual communications, I think, and then working through what each person really individually needs to be able to, bring their children, or, just to have someone listen to them and say, it's okay. If you make that decision to stay at home right now, that's great. That's totally fine. And we'll be here whenever you're ready for us.
Okay. Thank you, Gail. Christopher, you coordinate a collaborative group of school districts that share ideas and best practices around summer learning. Is there going to be an in-person summer? And if so, what is it going to look like? You can speak in general.
Yeah, I speak in general, obviously based on health regulation guidelines and Whether or not it's a possibility for us, we're still exploring it. Lots of districts want to have their students, just like what was said before, we want our students to be here. We also do continual communication, and I think we have to do it in various ways to let parents know that we are working towards this. Our main drivers for face-to-face, if we are going to continue to try to do this in the summer, in July, is for us to really look at the social, emotional, and health and learning of our students, as well as putting our community back to work and instilling some hope. And that's a really big point for us, is that, if we can do this, and I take a lot of pieces within our group, and I think you saw this in our last meeting, Rod, from daycare facilities and preschools, camps. We mentioned, I think it was a camp in southern Missouri that's going to open up this summer that had some really great ideas that we're looking at as well. So we can't just look inside the educational world. We have to look outside, even to businesses, to other organizations for best practices, to seek the unexpected, because there's going to be unexpected every single day, and that's what we're finding throughout this journey.
Okay, is there, well, with the summer programs that are going to be listed, is there differentiation by age groups?
Yes, there are. What we usually have is various buildings, and what we are looking to do is possibly consolidate those buildings to meet and to gather some of the materials that we have in terms of PPE and other things if we were having to be open face-to-face. Right now we are virtual, and so our virtual numbers are lower because I think kids have had a lot of virtual right now. And so for us, we've changed up classes and what that looks like in order to re-engage our students. The biggest thing is we can't get overwhelmed by obstacles, and we have found a lot of obstacles in this. But we know we can't underestimate the risk of just standing still. We can't stand still. And what I've noticed from a lot of people in the education world is there's so much analysis out there of what's going on that's created paralysis of movement in the system. And I think that that's where we have to check one another and help one another as one group to say, hey, what do you need? How can we serve one another? How can we help? And I've seen a lot of that in the Kansas City metro area, especially with businesses sharing, and I see huge Zooms with best practices, educational world as well. And Kansas City has really become a hub of collaboration to help one another succeed and grow together. So it's been actually a really great time for us to come together and do things for the best of our community.
I'm always impressed getting to know people in Kansas City and being part of your collaborative discussions with other school districts. Christopher, I know that you care also deeply about equity.
Yes.
Is there any changes that you're trying to implement in order to serve the kids who most need expanded learning time?
We have a lot of wonderful individuals in our district that work on that equity piece with us to stretch our imagination and not our imagination, but our minds in terms of how can we meet the needs of all students through this. And we do work on that. The one thing I do see in our district is our teachers going the full mile for every single student. I was on the phone with a teacher yesterday who was talking about how she was going over to a copy center that was open to make copies and drop it off at the door of a student with a special note for them. It's where really we have to instill that hope and love within our teachers and continue to foster that for our kids that especially need they need that learning in different ways. But the biggest thing, and you have hit on, Rod, is the social emotional learning piece. So for our summer school, we are really emphasizing the social emotional learning part with our teachers. We're doing specific professional development on it, as well as you have to get to the heart before you can get to the head with a student. And so we have to build that heart because it's the strongest muscle in the body. And I think that that's where we are going to find that. A lot of this has changed my own children at home. You asked that question about how this has changed students. I can tell you that my own kids, have had their ups and downs, and this week was more of a down. But we grow and learn every day, and they're resilient, and they can make it happen. And so that's what we're really looking at. But I have to stress that if you're going to reopen any sort of educational facility, you really have to look at that social emotional learning aspect, not only for your kids that you're working for, but also your adults. Your adults have to check themselves as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Christopher. So Joe, as Kansas City's largest provider of federally funded after-school and summer programs, under the 21st Century Community Learning Center program. What has been the impact of COVID on your programs?
Yeah, and I've been, and also, we work with 7 school districts, and I've been sitting in a lot of these conversations too, and we're right in the middle of a problem, and that's space for activities. Our problem is that all our programming is done through facilities of our schools partners, and they are all virtual right now. So we are not we don't have the opportunity to do programming, and so we start looking at ways to be creative with that. I was in a conversation, the Boys and Girls Club, the Operation Breakthrough, and the Upper Room, and they have places that they are trying to get. They're planning to have open to have some summer programming, but they have to have a lot fewer, and so they need more space, and the space is a premium, and then you need. And then there's all the supplies that they need. They need thermometers, they need cleaning things, they need, and then so you see this effort. Everyone's really trying to say, so how do we get space? How do we get the resources, the funding to support this? And then there's the concerns about staff too. I mean, you have to. Some teachers, if you don't have certified teachers who are comfortable coming back into an environment yet, then they're like, can you get around DESE's rules, or can you go within DESE's rules and have a master teacher and then some, I guess, interns or learning teachers coming inside. So I mean, Link, we would like to get programming. We had our part-time staff that staffs the school programs. We had them working on lesson plans and things like that for a while. But then as we get into May, it's as far as the funding we have, we have furloughed like 400 some of the part-time staff, in part because now they can do better with the stimulus opportunities there. So and then so if we want to get staff back, it'd be tricky there because they may be better off right now, the stimulus. But so anyway, that's the frustration I see. Everybody's really trying to get creative. But how do you do it when you can't have more than 10 in a classroom or things like that? It's a complicated.
Yeah. So you mentioned, Joe, you mentioned space, you mentioned getting the necessary resources, materials, and you mentioned the challenge of recruiting staff and bringing them back from furlough. Transportation. I'm surprised you didn't mention that. Is that something that you guys are wrestling with?
Yeah. So again, we do go kind of hand in glove with the school programs as we always have. So and if we were going to try to do something without the schools, we don't have transportation. As an after-school program, the kids are already there. And then it is a parent pickup at 6 or 7 o'clock at night. That's the way it's always been. So, that's things that the school districts have to deal with.
Okay. Have you been talking with the school districts about fall?
I know. I'm sure. Yeah, Christopher's doing that too. I mean, I think the way I've been describing it, it's like Plan A through Plan Z. I think everyone sounds they're hoping to get in the fall, but then you have to deal with the situation of you might have to stagger classes, and then combine. You have a blend with in-person, then virtual, and then you'd have to be really quick because if there's an outbreak in this school, I mean, then that school has to shut down. I mean, so I think it sounds like everyone's taking what they're learning this summer, which is, as Christopher said, I mean, everyone's having difficulty keeping students engaged. I mean, you had a rise at the beginning, there's a little fatigue. And so then if you have to start continuing virtual in the fall, there seems to be a sustainability concern. And so, these things will probably have to be blended, but I don't envy the people that are having to try to cover every of these education question bases, because it's going to be a real puzzle.
Well, Joe, since you do get the federal funding and you brought up sustainability, um, are you all looking at just decreasing the running programs, but decreasing the number of kids served?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure how it's going to work. I mean, we are, I think the summer, we don't anticipate, having programs in the summer at this point, unless we can come up with get out some kind of arrangement. But in the fall, I expect there'll be some program in the fall. I think the school is going to be open some way, and so we will be, in business, and we will be trying to serve our families and the communities every way we can.
Mm-hmm. Christopher, I think the class size limit there is about 10. Is that what you're hearing?
We are working towards anywhere, and discussions are still going on right now, but for virtual online, it's 10 to 15 right now. And we're building that 10 to 15 for June, July, and then discussion of what does that look like for the normal school year. And with materials, I think we've talked about materials a little bit here. We have to look to different types of programs. For example, I was on last night, and there was a website about preschool STEAM. And it was a really interesting program that, for our younger kids or before kindergarten, that is something they can do from home or something that our teachers can do right away, and our kids can be engaged. And I think the other thing too is, what Joe mentioned was kind of alluding to this a little bit too. What we've learned as a group, that Kansas City group together, is that we can't cling to models of the past during an uncertain present. Mm-hmm. A lot of people keep going to, well, we've never done it this way, or we can't do it this way. I drove by, there's a daycare facility right by my house, and I was watching some things that they were doing outside during the recess time, and there were things they probably had never done before, and students were doing their best to engage and do the things that they're supposed to do. But again, it's stretching some thinking with your staff, and that takes time, and there needs to be grace with that. And, with every mistake, there's going to be discovery to a new path and a new possibility. Yeah. And we got to continue to do that.
And I would, I guess, a quick question to Gail, because you're dealing with rather young kids, right? I mean,
yes.
I just can't imagine how do you do the expectations that we have about social distancing. It seems like getting kids to do that has got to be a real difficulty.
Yes. Well, it's just like every learning opportunity, Christopher, like what you just said about, you can't cling to the model of what you've done in the past, because now, just like every learning opportunity with children, we just set about activities to help show them. And it's more about, your bubble of your space, so how do you interact with the other students? Like giving yourself a hug, and instead of necessarily hugging your friends, or even right down to, when you're eating lunch, having distance between all the students, but yet still encouraging interaction amongst them. So, it's a process, and it's not perfect, because children are children, and they, like to be close and with each other. But I'm surprised at how well, especially when you're looking at, the 4 and 5-year-old students and the school age students, they adapt. Younger students, that's still a bit more of a challenge, but we just still work with them, and, still keep doing all these different activities, and then encouraging them, to follow those guidelines.
Your students are a lot more disciplined than my 2 little boys, who are, 7 and 10.
We talked about that, because if you're rolling around with your brother at home, it's hard to understand when you come to the school that you can't do it.
True.
Well, and I'll share that in California, you mentioned a bubble, and they're calling the stable cohorts bubble cohorts, and they're going to be issuing guidance next week, where they're saying the bubble is 12 kids in person, and they will be allowed to touch each other, because we just understand it's unrealistic for kids to not engage in physical contact. And then hopefully, as our ability to respond to any sort of spread increases, they want to bump it up 12 to, add a few more kids. But that will always be a determination as, based on circumstances. Christopher, let me ask you straight out. In general, what are the reentry scenarios that school districts are looking at for the fall? Are you part of those?
For the fall,
Yeah, for the fall.
A lot of districts are collaborating with reentry groups, and from what I've seen and heard, and you've heard them, I think, on some of the Zooms that we've been on, it's everything from half day, to different blended, like we had talked about before, similar to other states. To be honest with you, I think a lot of what Kansas City has done very well is they've opened up to look at what's happening in the East and West Coast as well, to see what they're thinking about doing for reentry, as well as internationally. I think we're looking at what Italy's doing and China is doing in terms of practices, logistics, and protocol. I watched a video this morning, actually, of a student, you can find it on YouTube, walking into the school in China, and he, gets his shoes sprayed, and it's a nice fun song, and then he goes through and gets his hands washed, and then he looks into this robot, he puts his hand in this robot, tells his temperature, and then he takes the hand of his teacher and walks in. And it's and that looks great, but logistically we all know that that's not how it's going to look. And so what we know for sure is everyone is looking and putting the priority on safety, and that kids feel safe, but not only safe just in terms of health, but also for social, and I'm going to say it again over again, social and emotional. And so, for a student to walk off of a bus in a scenario, and the first thing they do is take a temperature, that is completely different than what we've done in the past. Because what they used to walk off on a bus is they get a hug from their teacher. So those hugs are going to have to look different. How we care for them is going to have to look different, but we're going to make it happen.
Well, I love what you said about, don't cling to models of the past. We're honestly seeing the same potential scenarios of using staggered school day schedules or alternating day schedules with, Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays and Fridays, with Wednesday being a full, wipe down of the school facilities. There are many different flavors and variations of that.
But don't you think a lot of this has to do with space, like Joe was talking about a minute ago, with space and time? We can look at it in a totally different direction of, we do have this time that's different, and we do have a lot of space, but how do we do that in terms of meeting those requirements of only 50 kids to a building, or 100, whatever it is for whatever county that you're in. And I think that that's the biggest piece, is the people that run the day-to-day operations behind are really stretching their thinking to say, how do we clean a building within a time frame when a student comes in and leaves for the next day for their health and safety. And I'd actually like to ask, for daycare facilities, how do you handle that right now? What does that look like?
Well, it's just heightened, like everything that we've been doing lately. And that guide, I thought, was a very good guide that was put out this week, because it's exactly what you need to do. All solid surfaces and all those things, we have a protocol for disinfecting and then sanitizing. We've taken the toys and reduced them in half on some of our shelves so that we can rotate. So, as you play with a basket, then we can take that basket aside and put other baskets out to make sure that they still have the materials they needed, but yet we can clean and sanitize accordingly. We have Naptime, so we're at a bit of an advantage, I would imagine, over in elementary school. So as the students all lay down and settle down, then we'll go through and sanitize all the hard surfaces and disinfect. We've always 3-stepped. I mean, that's a state requirement as far as tables and chairs and all those things, but it's just now more often. And also being very vigilant with the children as far as, what they touch, right? Like picking up trash cans and things like that. Like all of those things is a new routine for children. So washing hands. I mean, we've been washing hands. I think we've been preparing for this for years. So, just continuing on those same practices, but yet, like I said, a heightened awareness.
Yeah, I know that before school shut down, we were going over things with our staff and their after school programming. I mean, Now everything's heightened, but there's always been concerns about the flu. There's always been concerns about that. So cleaning, wiping down, and sanitizing is always part of the protocol.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Gail, do you see actual increases in custodial time and expenses? I mean, is it
Yes.
like double what you used to see before, or higher?
A lot of us, the teachers are self-cleaning because, like I said, we have some Naptime and things like that, as well as other services. But yes, I mean, especially when you're looking at, going through paper towels, gloves, the amount of gloves that we are going through is definitely at a higher amount. But yes, it takes more time and energy to do those things, but it's important.
Well, turning back to my original question around what fall might look like, I'm envisioning parents who need to go back to work, seeing that their child can only be in school for part of the week, whether it's alternating days or morning versus afternoon, and trying to piece together a place where they can, a program where they can leave their kid, whether it be supervised, getting help for distance learning, and getting other, fun enrichment activities. It's going to be a huge change from how parenting used to be. I mean, my wife and I talk about shipping our kids off to an island for a year and, just saying, just stay out of our hair so we can focus on work and not have to help you with, getting logged into Zoom or Microsoft Teams. It's a lot of work. Of course, we're going to keep them with us, but, I'd like to, explore that idea that Chris was talking about, that, look, we have to think outside the box. We have to think outside of our traditional, institutional boundaries even, and think about how can we leverage other organizations' strengths, assets, if both school-run programs and other out-of-school time programs are all facing the same reduction in capacity, service capacity, what can we do to piece it together so that kids are still being, properly supervised during a school week?
I think one thing, and this is not what our district is doing, but this is just my own personal belief. So I want to make sure
let's blue sky this.
Before my superintendent says, what are you talking about? Most people overestimate the risk of trying something new. They overestimate it. It's just what we are sometimes as humans, that we just go over and over again and say, this is just something new, this can't be done. And a lot of things we have in our city, we have park districts, we have busing systems, we have a lot of infrastructure that we could actually use in different ways to help people get to work and try different things. And so I think that's an idea to bring people to the table to say, how can we work together to achieve our goal of getting people back to work, getting students back to school, getting students engaged in different ways. And so, there's some ideas I've seen out there where park districts have worked with other school districts for programs that they've done this summer, where the kids meet at local parks and they go through and they do lessons together, they play certain games, and that fulfills their time during that time, and also their need of friendship and growing and learning from one another outside of school. I'm not saying that's happening here right now, but you can see that in other places. There's also a lot of businesses that have people that work there that could volunteer time to, or resources to come together, and maybe districts band together for busing, to bring students into different areas. And so you wouldn't have to use just your own buses. There's a lot of things we could do if we it's like that book, We're Better Together, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so it's something that we could think about doing. I don't know how, but that's just, in desperate times call for lots of innovation. And so I think we're seeing a lot of that across the board all over the country.
Right. Gail, when we talked earlier this week, you mentioned that you actually have a childcare facility with the Liberty Public Schools district.
Yes.
What would be helpful to learn from Liberty, if you wanted to be able to serve more students?
Well, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. Currently, parents, I mean, they'll call us and say, have you heard? Is Liberty doing summer school? Because they want to know what's going on.
Mhm.
Right now, we have the capacity to serve more students. I think definitely, Liberty has done such a great job with their public schools. And I think the families want to be at the public school. But as to what you're talking about, there's going to have to be some collaboration for them to be able to attend part day, possibly at the public school, or this 1 week on, 1 week off. I've heard all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we're really questioning about was the busing. Currently we have some buses that come to us. Currently we bus some students. Would we need more buses? Should we be able to get some more to possibly help with students? And then, what does that look like as far as our drop off, our pickups? There was all kinds of questions like that. But mainly when we think about with our families, they want to know if we'll be able to partner with you to help with their learning. So as a support to the students that we have, we realize that we are going to have some of our teachers assist and be able to, I think it would help for them to be able to understand what your plan is so that we can make sure that we're mirroring it and help ensuring the students' success at our school.
So that articulation between, I mean, it's interesting that parents think that you are part of the public, school district and are asking you.
That's interesting. You just said that.
I'm not.
Yeah, well, no, but that's interesting when you say that, because we just had a phone call from someone that said, well, this one school district to the north of us is they're doing after school and before school care. The school district is, and I said, well, that would be news to a lot of school districts in the metro area. And then as we talked further, I had to explain that no, that's actually a facility that's not run by the school district. And there is some parents out there that don't understand the difference between those things, and that's where you have to help to educate them, because they're searching for answers. Our parents are searching for answers. They need help, they need assistance, and they'll work with anyone to get that, and we should help them.
Yeah. And so the only other thing that has come up is, we have some students that require special services. And so they have been inquiring about, what will that look like for them for summer? And will that be available for them in the fall? Especially the students we have that would be entering kindergarten. So that would be their first year.
Yep.
Gail, you were talking about the articulation, if you will, of having your teachers being more aware of what's actually being taught in the regular classrooms and how they might be able to complement that work. How do you envision seeing that work?
Well, I think it's going to kind of be that simple. I mean, I think as the school district prepares their plans and begin sharing it with all the families, and I'm sure that the school districts are looking for support as well, so they're willing to share. And as they do, then we will create support around that. We've already begun looking at, the technology side of having multiple students using systems within our school and being able to do that. Also having, iPads and laptops and things for students to work on as well. But then, just assisting with anything that they may need support with. So it's going to kind of look different by school district, I think, and then also by student, because every student needs something different. I think we have a very active family group, especially in North Kansas City and Liberty. It's like a club. It's how I would refer to it. So,
it's a fun club. It's a fun club.
It is a really fun club. It really is.
They're fun. They're great.
Everybody knows everybody, and everybody wants everyone to, be involved. So I think, involvement is the key right there. I've worked in places, in school districts that don't have that kind of family commitment, and that makes it tougher.
Yeah. So
in the North Kansas City area, I think, all of us just getting together and being on the same page a little bit with what everybody needs is really going to be helpful for our students.
Is there a way to, do you think, to involve, like, if you're thinking about we need kids, if you're limited in capacity, and we're finding that it's kind of difficult to really have attendance virtually, if we're trying to get space, can we cooperate with the city and the community centers? Can we bring in churches in their church basements, or when they're not that active Monday through Friday? I mean, is there a way to create smaller pod classrooms where there would be a place where they're expected to go, and you have attendance, you have an educator there or program director, leader, It take a lot of networking
and collaboration.
Like
Well, a lot of collaboration, but also agreeing on terms, and saying that these are the things we're going to do. And I think one thing we can look towards is, Kansas City is really, many counties that make up the whole region, where I live. And so 2 states and different pieces. And I think that it's very, there's a lot of love for the city, and a lot of fun where people want to be together with family. And I think it wouldn't be as hard to do as what we think. I think it's more of, how can we get that together? And there's probably a group of people right now, as we're on the Zoom, doing that right now, and thinking through it.
Yeah, I think the issue would be with my organization is, of course, we're licensed by the state of Missouri.
Yeah.
And so they have limitations on opening up new centers and issuing new licenses and things like that. And so us expanding into other areas, I think, would be a little bit more complicated, honestly.
Right.
Gail, how about in terms of, rather than opening up new centers, parents are going to be just trying to fill out a school day or school week. What if you could, can you expand the hours under those state requirements? Is that as onerous?
Yes. Well, and I think you and I talked about that earlier this week. I think as a provider, we're going to have to look at completely different type of scheduling. It's going to be more based off of what the family actually needs versus the typical model that we have. You come in the morning, you come in the afternoon, you come 2 days, you come 3 days. It's going to have to be way more flexible. And I think hours are going to be included in that. What we've seen with the beginning of this is hour reduction. People coming in later, people leaving earlier, those types of things. And now as businesses begin to open up and people return to work, and in some situations, not even returning to the same place to work, the hours now are changing. And so, we just have to be really fluid at this point to be able to change to what they need.
Yeah. There are huge implications for your business model, for the teaching model, and for the program model. It's the entire shebang there. Joe, what kind of information would you like to hear from the various school districts that Link works in order to be able to further plan and figure out, are you going to be able to launch your programs this fall?
Yeah, I imagine we'll probably be where everybody is. We'll be making plans to, as if school's going to be, there is going to be programs in buildings in the fall. They might be smaller. I think the trick will be, again, how many people you can have, and so we'll have to be flexible also. But I guess as they get their plans together, we are always going to want to be right there with them, collaborating, and where they need us, when they need us. We're going to be working on to be ready to get back into those buildings, those sites as they return to them.
So is it really just getting the approval to get back on school sites and having dedicated classrooms?
Yeah, no, so now the question is would we want to have anything available if the schools weren't? And we've always been, if the school had a snow day, then Link would have a snow day. I mean, if the school let out early, that's one time that we would open early, and we would have a longer day to accommodate that. But if the school is closed, then we would close. So we've never acted independently as far as using the facilities. So.
I'm wondering whether, so there's the facility constraints. I imagine a school site's going to need every single classroom they can, that's available in order to serve as many kids as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the staffing constraint. And, I'm wondering whether credentialed teachers could actually work with a link program or with, La Petite childcare to help augment your staffing ratios, if there's that opportunity. And I don't know if there's any either collective bargaining rules around it or HR rules that would prevent that.
Yeah, and I'd have to look into that. I'm not sure. We would be, I think if by fall, I mean, our cycles are, we would be able to get work staff, I'm sure, up for the fall. So I think we would have the staff. Again, it's just will there be a place to do the program? And that's why I'm just thinking the idea is there ways to make partnerships with other entities and things to help give space.
Yeah, Rod, I think what you're asking is, when you're faced with obstacles, you have to challenge conventional wisdom. Is that what you're trying to say right now? Is that, ask what, why not, what if, and why should we do this? Is that what you're trying to say? Like, what if?
Yeah, I think each of you have these. You have these organizations that are kind of like silos. Link has the funding, you have the know-how, you have the brand reputation of quality programs, but you don't have space and you may not have the buses.
Right.
But, how can we take down some of those walls so that it's more fluid? Because the schedules are going to be more fluid that parents have to piece together. So,
Right.
I'm very realistic. That's why I was saying, hey, there's going to be labor union rules. There's going to be regulatory rules.
I think you've seen some entities though. There's a saying. There's a guy by the name of Josh Linkner who's a innovationist from Michigan. He's a big innovator, and he says a saying: you got to change the rules to get the jewels a little bit, in order to take that risk. And I think that we've seen DESE do a little bit of that, where they've give some guidelines and recommendation, gives a little more flexibility during our time frame for summer, at least in public schools, where we can go all the way up to the first day of school. And I think you're going to see some more of that. You've seen that with people taking, financing these days, people that are happening all the way in the business world. There's a lot of relaxation and changing of rules left and right.
Right.
And
right.
That's going to happen though, in order for us to do those things that you were talking about. Is we're going to, have to bend the rules a little bit to get to those ways, and not break them, obviously, but
right.
find ways around them.
Yeah. Well, it seems like there has to be a framework for organizing that discussion for these types of informal collaborations and partnerships. And I know that all three of you are very much focused on the children, making sure they're the ones that are served in the best way possible. And I guess let me just ask you a final question, Christopher. What is, with your best guess, when do you think these types of discussions might take place? When could a district and all the community partners come to a table together to start whiteboarding how to help provide enough childcare and out-of-school time coverage for kids so that the kids get educated, the parents can go to work, and the kids are, are also safe and engaged?
You know, that's a great and loaded question, and I think that that's where I think if we don't do it now, this is our biggest opportunity to do it. This is an opportunity to have that discussion now, and I think, you know, Gail and Joe are going to answer, you know, but I think that with this opportunity that we have here in front of us to think of new ways and partner together and be better together, I think that, you know, this opportunity is available. And I think there are some things that I am seeing happening between educational entities and, well, for example, just students that go out and do internships and externships right now. Education has been in partnership with businesses for a long time,
Yeah.
in many ways. And so why can't we build on that for something like this right now? So now would be a great time for this. Gail, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's always been a lot of support, you know, as far as education. And we have a lot of great businesses here in Kansas City that definitely support all of us. And then there's different agencies, and I think we've all kind of maybe fallen into our own little group, like you're used to collaborating with the same people. And I think now we're going to have to stretch out a little bit and really recognize what can we all do for each other, because we all have the same goal. You know, we all want what's best for the children and the families in the Kansas City area. And in order to accomplish that, that's going to mean doing some different things, like you just said, outside of our normal boundaries. And I know everybody that I talk to is open to that. So, you know, we just are going to have to, like you said, act now versus later, because it seems like months are clicking by faster than I ever remember them. It'll be fall before you know it.
Yeah, it's like we got to get the, and I think everyone has a lot of good cooperation within their groups. Gail, as you say, like there's the cooperating school districts of Greater Kansas City. And then there's the After School Alliance, which brings in a lot of ideas for after school programs. And then the early childhood, you have your groups. And the city has their parks and recs and all that. So, but we need to bring those all groups together, because I think this says in the business, the Chamber of Commerce and stuff. I mean, they, you know, as Rod, you know, we work a lot with Turn the Page KC, and you know, and they did have a meeting that I was on just earlier this week, you know, which I was kind of referring to, and the Boys and Girls Club and Upper Room, and some of those were together trying to figure these things out. So we got everyone obviously is thinking about it. So now we just need to do a little more cross-pollination.
You know, Rod, when you brought in, that's a great point, Joe. When you brought in Turn the Page KC and all those other programs when we met face to face before all this happened, you know, we had a half of a notepad just full of ideas that were coming from other places for us to become better at what we do, to continuously improve. So I think Joe's right. I mean, the more that we can sit down together and learn from one another, we all have the same goal in mind, and that's the love and care of children, you know. And so I think that that's an easy thing for us to all sit together and say, well, this is our goal together.
Well, that's a great way to wrap this up. I appreciate you just sharing where you are now. I know there weren't going to be any silver bullets, no definitive answers and solutions here, but just hearing from each of your perspectives, the desire and also what's currently being tried, and what's needed. I think, you know, that's everybody is striving in the same direction, and now we just need to get at the same table. And InPlay will just play its small part to try to nudge all the pieces of the puzzle together and do whatever it can. So I appreciate all of you. I want to thank you all for spending your early afternoon with me. And we'll look forward to continuing the conversation some other time.
All right. Thanks, Rod. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Gail.
Gail and Joe, good to see you guys.
And you too, Nancy.
Bye.
Thank you.